This episode would have been great if the Power Rangers were the ones to get this power. Like, wouldn't this be an epic way, instead of like how Zordon chooses some random freaking kids to have that power or to have their powers? Like, this feels more like a Power Rangers way of getting the power, as opposed, like, I was expecting Zordon to come up when they went to actual Jupiter, or a moon in Jupiter, close to Jupiter. I'm assuming that's why the show is called Jupiter's Legacy, even though it's not really on Jupiter. It's a moon close to Jupiter, but whatever. But yeah, it felt very Power Ranger-ish type of episode. But anyways, welcome to That's a Wrap, the channel where I review TV shows, movies, and movie trailers. Today's TV show that we will be reviewing is Episode 7 of the Netflix original Jupiter's Legacy. If you're not familiar with this show or not yet caught up, please consider this your spoiler warning. So let's get on to the review. By far, this was the best episode. It's such a shame that the show took to Episode 7. And I'm sure that, they had the reasons for really over explaining the origins and having all these characters. They didn't have to be fleshed out so much. It's probably the best way I could say it. If this episode was in episode 2 or 3 and you could have taken it into a different path, what could have been, right? Because they got a lot of things, right in this episode. I know you could just go back and take a listen to every one of my reviews of this series. I am not a fan, and I shit on it pretty heavily in my frustration of why they took so long to get to certain parts. But just to summarize it, my displeasure in certain things that they have done in this TV show, for reasons that I don't think the show is going to get to in this last episode coming up. Again, this is probably a show that's suffering from season 2-itis, and I'm sure since it's Netflix, they'll probably get a season 2. But there's just so many loose ends to this point. And it's a shame because this episode was probably the most well-written, well-acted, the most suspenseful. I felt emotion when they had to overcome, when they reached that dead and they're turning against each other, and they had to overcome their differences to be worthy enough to get their powers. It's still not sure as to who's the one that brought them all together, but an entity chose them for whatever reasons, if you will. But this episode was very emotional, impactful, a true origins episode, as opposed to what we have seen, which is a character development episodes from episode 2 to now, or episode 2 to 6. It's just a bunch of nonsense, basically. You could skip the whole backlog or the 1929s part. And I get that, obviously you can't miss it because you won't see them all come together. But you could have condensed it all in one episode and told an actual story. And I get that maybe the story was to give it a origins feel, like how a comic book would give it. And again, I'm not sure if this is strict to the comic book or if it's deviating from that. But I can't imagine a comic book going that much into that kind of a storyline as to, oh yeah, look, as opposed to maybe being a couple of pages before boom, hey, we all need to be together. And it seems like the show probably fleshed them out too much. And I know I critique other properties, when I see the movies, as to not fleshing out characters enough. But this is an example of fleshing them out too much, where when you didn't have to. You could have condensed it a lot more and just told a more enjoyable story. Now, again, I don't know how the critics have been reviewing this. As I said in my prior reviews, I've been trying to stay away from any sort of topic from this episode, but I do, every time I log into Netflix, I see it number 1 trending since its premiere, and I think it's only been 2 days since its premiere as of this recording. So I'm assuming people are liking it. So I might be in the minority, and I might be completely off in my reviews or in my disgust or my disdain for it. Not just saying disdain. I hate this show. I don't hate this show. It's disappointing because you saw in this episode the potential, and it's sad that now we only have one episode. Not sad, disappointing that we only have one more episode, and I'm assuming they're gonna try to go out with a bang, but we'll see. But I really enjoyed it. Like I said, them receiving their powers, this whole episode from start to finish was enjoyable. It was, like I said, well acted, well executed. The score was perfect. Whoever is the composer for this episode, hats off to you. You did a great job in capturing and making that scene when they're touching the wall and all the lights are coming up. I felt something, and the music enhanced it, and it was just the right tone of epicness to make that scene epicness. That whole part where they're looking at people in their lives that matter to them. You know, obviously, I've said it before, the foreshadowing in this TV show is very strong, which is ridiculous. Too much foreshadowing, even more than Marvel. So... And Marvel's at the max of how you need to, just the right amount anyways of foreshadowing. But in some instances, even that, they take it too much. But this whole, every episode is a foreshadow to something later on. And if you just pay attention, like when they were all walking, they're like, oh, well, who would you see if you had a chance to see, somebody from your past? And voila, we see at the end of the show that those exact people were the ones that they saw to let them like, hey, you've reached the end of Jumanji. Here you go. Now you become a superhero for reasons, because none of them deserve to have any kind of superpowers. But that's a discussion for maybe another channel or for another day. So I enjoyed this episode, but like, the saying goes, too little, too late. For me, it's too little, too late. But that's just my opinion. I would love to hear your opinions. Let me know your opinions down in the comments. And like always, that's a wrap.